And we are off. Hi, gang. Welcome back. It's Monday, November 3rd. We are now less than 24 hours before the NFL 2025 trade deadline. The Dolphins already made a move on Monday morning. There also was a lot of big news over the weekend, some speculation about a possible benching of Tua Tagovailoa. And to discuss all of that on today's episode, I am joined by Dave Hyde, columnist for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Dave, fun times at Dolphins headquarters, are they not?
Whew, a lot to unpack. A lot to unpack from this, and some muscle memory also of interim.
Yep.
Not GMs though. I don't think we've had an interim GM, so we might have checked that box off this time.
Yeah, I couldn't recall. Somebody asked me that like last week or something, and I could not remember an interim GM situation. Before we get to all of this, and again, there's a lot to unpack. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. For those who like listening to the podcast and not seeing my ugly mug, and who could blame you for that, there's always the audio version of the podcast, wherever you get your audio podcast, whether it be Google, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. And lastly, please check out the written content at MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com, where everything is free. Okay, I guess, Dave, we will start, since you have not been on the show since the big news on Friday. Your initial reaction to Chris Grier being let go, or mutual parting of the ways, other than probably it's about time.
Yeah, overdue was my first reaction, and no, it couldn't have surprised anybody. The only surprise was what I was told why it happened, which was Steve Ross wanted some answers of what they were going to do at the trade deadline, and Chris hadn't made calls, and what his idea was let people call him. And I think at 2-7, Ross wanted someone to be a little more proactive in there. And so that was the final straw. That obviously wasn't the reason he was fired. It was just the last thing that happened to push Ross over the edge.
Maybe we're getting into semantics, or I'm getting too picky here, but wouldn't you imagine if you're 2-7 and you got some guys with either are veterans with big cap numbers or guys on one-year contracts, wouldn't you figure the teams would call you anyway?
Yeah, I mean, but again, I'm sure Philadelphia was looking at Chubb or Jaylen Phillips, and you look at the tape and Jaylen Phillips is playing better. He's going to cost you a little more, but Vic Fangio has a background, great guy, great teammate. Yep. Is going to give you everything. And I think it was a smart deal for both teams. The Dolphins, Jaylen Phillips is a guy you'd love on your team. It's just a tricky contract situation because of his two serious injuries the past 2 years. And how much do you allot for that? And so they hadn't signed him, so get something for him at the very least. And, of course, now they can stand in line and try to re-sign him if they want, which that never happens.
I'm sure it has, but I don't know.
It has. I'm sure someone will write in it has, but yeah. The odds of it happening usually aren't very good.
Okay, but you jumped ahead. You jumped a couple of chapters into the book over here. So let's backtrack to
the
news with Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel. And the reporting from Friday on, it began with, don't be surprised if Mike McDaniel comes back in 2026. He's going to be at least through the end of the season. And then the Rappaport report, which was on Sunday morning, was basically he really likes Mike and he wants to see him through with him through next year. And then Mike McDaniel was asked Monday as the back end of a two-part question. The first part was his thoughts when Chris Grier was let go, and then if you could confirm that Stephen Ross had told him he would stay on through the end of the season. And after a very lengthy answer about Chris Grier and how, you develop a relationship with guys, conveniently skipped the second part of the question. I don't know if you picked up on that, but
yeah, I mean that there was some obfuscation going on there, to use a big word that Mike might have used. But
yes.
I wrote a column and I was told Friday that Steve Ross wants Mike through the rest of the year at least.
Mm-hmm.
And that will come down to one of the prime driving forces in that is that he can work with Tua. And the idea is he could get whatever the most out of him with Tua. And from an ownership standpoint, they're looking at the contract that Tua has, which is $99 million of dead cap money if they release him this year, 54 million against the salary cap into next year. So Steve Ross's idea is Tua is going to be here. We need someone to work with them, and so the rest of this season of relatively inconsequential football isn't inconsequential in the big picture, because if McDaniel can keep the team from collapsing and win, I don't know how many games, or make it look like a functioning football team, then Steve Ross would be more beholden to bring him back next year. I don't know how to go far with any of this. That's just what's on the table. They want to bring him back. That they're giving him the rest of the season to prove he should come back next year. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think we weren't kidding when we said multiple times when the Dolphins gave Tua that contract, they basically married him through the 2026 season, because, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, the Dolphins could go the Denver Broncos route, but with Denver Broncos with Russell Wilson, it was $85 million, not $99. Not to say that it can't be done. It's one of those where it's like, oof. And, of course, the next question is, what makes Stephen Ross think? I mean, it's wonderful that McDaniel can work wonders with Tua, which he did to a certain degree in 2022 and 2023. Where's that gotten the Dolphins the last 2 years? And why would we think it's going to be any better in 2026 when the talent around, which we all know Tua really needs, probably is not going to be as good?
Yeah, there's no reason to think it would. It'd be a better season. I mean, you could think, okay, they're going to draft a quarterback with the top pick. They'll have Tua there too. I'm just thinking, look, they're in the rebuild. When you trade Jaylen Phillips for a third-round pick, that's the official start, or the official start was the firing of Chris Grier. I mean, but we're there, okay? And here we go again, another massive rebuild. And it takes talent to find talent. That's sort of the lesson of the past 20 years with the Dolphins. You need talent in the front office and the coaching staff to find talent. And, beyond what's going to happen with Mike, that also will play into who's the general manager. Because is it Champ Kelly's job, the interim guy? Now, is it his job? Is it, we know it is through the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Have they said, okay, we'll keep that together? Because can you go outside and get a general manager who would be married to Mike and Tua to start with in his new? That'd be very difficult. You'd certainly be limiting your prospects. All this, I don't want to say this is so Dolphin, but this is so Dolphin.
Yeah, there's expressions around the NFL. There's a Chargers chargering. There's a Falcons falconing, which I didn't know there was a thing until before the Dolphins played the Falcons. And we definitely have the Dolphins dolphining. And the Dolphins dolphining is usually, as it involves coaching and GM changes being made, piecemeal type of deal. That's my prediction. My prediction is Champ Kelly's going to be the interim for this year. And then we're running it back with Tua, Mike McDaniel, and Champ Kelly, partly because of the point you made. And if you go big game hunting for the hotshot GM candidates, generally speaking, those are guys who currently are in good situations as an assistant GM or as a secondary role with strong organizations. And chances are they're going to have good options. Why would they rush to take a job where they're tied and they're told that's your quarterback, that's your head coach?
Yeah, and then it answers itself, right? It's kind of if Ross, and I'll go even further, if just by delaying just by holding on to Mike through the rest of the season, you're limiting the ability to go out and look what are the options out there are for Mike. Even I mean, and I've thrown out there, I would talk to Lane Kiffin. I mean, former NFL coach, knows how to win, as he's proven somehow at Mississippi. I mean, I'm not saying it's a slam dunk or anything, but you can't really have serious conversations with anybody while you have Mike here, and while the future's up in the air, and the interim GM's up in the air of what to do, because no one who has serious options is really going to talk to you.
No, it's just weird. And look, Mike McDaniel has good qualities as a head coach. I think his leadership qualities have come into question. There's some game management stuff that's not great. The fact that they're being outscored by an average of 4 points a game, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot, in the third quarter, is not necessarily a great reflection on him. So it's like, okay, great, he got the most out of Tua in 2022 and 2023. Would that be reason enough to keep him? Yeah, and then the other part of the equation too is, if the Dolphins are rolling with Mike McDaniel heading into next season, unless there's a complete collapse, even more so than we've already seen, is coaching the rest of the season to win games, or at the very least for the Dolphins to be very competitive and not put out what we saw at Cleveland or against Baltimore, which means he's going to play the more veteran players, guys who might not be around in 2026, or guys where the Dolphins have more information, as opposed to giving extended playing time to young players with the idea of, let's see if these are guys we need to have with us as we move forward. And is that really the best thing for the long-term health of the organization?
Yeah, I think what is the game plan? What is the
Correct.
game plan is ultimately the question here, right? And that's something they got to decide. And as you said, if they're telling Mike, you got to show this team can play and play hard and win some games, and that's one game plan. The other game plan is play all the young kids and develop and see what you got. Now they are playing almost all the young kids regardless, but it would certainly be a little change in mindset. My read on Mike was they hired him. His number one priority was to find out who Tua was, and he did that, and he did it very well. The first year, you saw what the strengths of Tua, the things he couldn't do, etc. The mistake was he went all Ted Lasso and falling in love and building him up and saying, I can win with this guy, win big. And we've seen that isn't the case. And so at some point he had to be that cold-hearted coach, that cold-hearted football guy who looks at Tua and says, can we win and contend for a Super Bowl with his limitations, his inability to run, his unathleticism, his physical size? Can we win with that? And that's really where the mistake was made when they gave him the big contract.
Without question. And there was a big contract that Mike McDaniel pounded the table for, by all reports. And it was also at a time, and I think Mike McDaniel was a little bit after Tua, also got a contract extension. And I've said it before, and I know you guys are tired of hearing it, but it still boggles my mind that a head coach with 2 years left on his contract gets an extension while not having won a single playoff game.
And I will say, I don't have this information, but someone at NFL.com, maybe Ian Rappaport, reported it. They owe him $19 million over the next 2 years, Mike McDaniel. So this was reported a few weeks ago. So and assuming that's true, because they're the NFL.com is the PR wing of the NFL teams, and they go hand in glove, and so they rarely report anything that isn't coming through the team. And so you tack that onto the $99 million of dead money, and we're up to almost $120 million that Steve Ross would have to swallow if he moves on from these two. Along
with the pride of being looked at as the owner who,
as I wrote in my column this weekend, Joe Robbie built the stadium for $110 million. So that to put in context what $120 million is.
Yeah, and this is why, by the way, if you're wondering why it is that, generally speaking, all the major news is broken by NFL Network or ESPN, well, they're partners with the NFL and therefore with the teams, and therefore, guess what? They get fed the information. It's not like it used to be in the old days where, some of it would trickle to the beat guys and all that. That's a whole different ballgame. Speaking of Tua, on Monday, Mike McDaniel was asked, because Ian Rappaport in a column over the weekend threw out the idea of a potential benching, something along the lines of do not dismiss the idea of a potential benching, or no, benching is not off the table if the performance is bad. Mike McDaniel was asked, and if there is a benching, which could come, and it could be if the Dolphins reach a point where, like, okay, Mike, you're coming back in 2026 now. Let's evaluate our young guys. So let's put Quinn Ewers in there. As long as Mike McDaniel is in I got to win games mode or be very competitive, as he said today, I'm going to play the guys who give us the best chance to win. And that quarterback, that's Tua Tagovailoa, which was kind of to be expected.
Yeah, and I got to admit, let's unless Quinn Ewers or they aren't even sure who the second quarterback is. So that tells you that neither of them is really impressing too much in the practices or workouts that they have. So this idea that they would play Quinn Ewers to see who I don't really understand where that's coming from. The other thing is all the players know who the best quarterback is. Okay. And they might have questions about Tua, but as long as in practice, he's the best, he gives them the best chance. You got to play him because you're going to lose the rest of the team. Now, you might say, oh, it doesn't matter, the rest of the team. No, what the Dolphins need is they need these rookies, second-year players to keep developing. They got to have those guys. They can't just waste half a season and say, we'll come back next year and find answers then. No, you want to keep going right now.
Yeah, but
don't say tank. Don't say tank.
No. I'm not in the tank category, but to me, I'm like, maybe it's silly, but I like the idea of, like, let's see what you got. For example, I'll give you a player, Taj Washington. Okay, I would like at some point to see what he can do with extended playing time. His fumble against Baltimore notwithstanding. For example, Zeke Biggers, the rookie 7th-round pick defensive tackle, who's got the big size. I'd like to see what he can do. Are they the best players at their position right now to help the Dolphins win? No. Dolphins are not making the playoffs. So at some point, again, and this is not going to happen until Mike McDaniel is told you're definitely back for next year, because otherwise cut off his nose to spite his face. It makes no sense for him to play guys who are not best equipped to help him win games. But for me, as you look toward 2026, that's more important than beating, I don't know, the New Orleans Saints on November 30th or something.
Yeah, I think at some point they have to make a decision on Mike. Either couldn't commit to, if I was Ross, I couldn't commit to next season. I mean, it'd make no sense to me. So maybe during the bye week, that would be all the conversation of the Dolphins have had is he's here through the end of the season. So when I throw this out there, this flies in the face of that. But that would be an exit ramp to your point about playing young guys and all that stuff. At the same time, I think you can work in young guys, but at other positions. But quarterback's a completely different animal, as we all know, on the team. I mean, so Tua gives them their best chance to look like a functioning NFL offense, and usually they do when he's there. I'm not saying great. I'm not saying his play this season has been anything but questionable at a lot of times. But let's not pretend that he's just he's an awful quarterback.
No, I wouldn't say he's awful. He's been very inconsistent this year, and again, he's got limitations that are very problematic, and which is why. And the biggest limitation right now he has is cap flexibility, because then I see reports of like, well, go ahead and trade him. Sure, good luck finding a team that's taking on that contract. Good luck not seeing it. Okay, let's go back to the trade here. It's for those not aware of it. It's Jaylen Phillips to the Philadelphia Eagles for a third-round pick. The Eagles currently have 2 third-round picks. They have their own. They have the one they got from the New York Jets in the trade involving Hassan Reddick after the 2023 season. Dolphins got the later of the 2, which is the Eagles' own, which sucks. I'll be honest with you, getting a third-round pick for Jaylen Phillips is actually very good work. There are reports out there that the Dolphins paid a good chunk of the remaining $6.5 million or $6.6 million of Jalen Ramsey's salary, which is on his 5th-year option. He will become a free agent at the end of the year. And as I wrote on MiamiDolphinsSI.com, this was the 8th trade between the Dolphins and the Eagles in the past 11 years. Check it out. I graded every single one of them, including this one. And without revealing the grade, I liked it because, and I'm going to say this as politely as I can, Jaylen Phillips is a great guy, great ambassador for the Dolphins. We talked about players who are good players who are not so much, don't represent the Dolphins very well. Jaylen Phillips absolutely does. Solid player, but can we not rewrite history here and make him out to be Myles Garrett, as I'm seeing for some more so on the Philadelphia side where they think they got like a 15-sack kind of guy. He's a solid player. If he was an impact player, I think the Dolphins might have been more inclined to actually extend him, give him a long-term contract extension. He wasn't that guy. Yeah. Plus, he's got the injury history. So getting a third for him, I'd say nice work.
Well, I think he was on the road to being that big impact player when the injuries hit. I really do. He had 8 sacks at back end of his rookie year, and I thought he was on the road to be great. And injuries hit, and he's still look. Philadelphia's leading pass rusher has 21 pressures. Jaylen Phillips has 23 this year. Okay, so you can see why Philadelphia wanted him. They needed a pass rusher, and he's effective. He was good this year. He wasn't great. He wasn't Pro Bowl worthy, anything like that. The question for him is, where's he at with his injury? Usually it takes an Achilles injury. It takes a while, a year, and then you're back to normal. And he's had 2 severe injuries, and where's he going to be in another year from all that? And does he get back on the road to? I really did. I thought he could be, a great player. So we'll differ on that. But the bottom line to me, it's one of these trades. You look at it, my immediate reaction is I get what both teams are doing. It makes sense for both sides.
It does, because again, the Eagles already have, I think they already had 8 or 9 picks. They're expecting like 3 compensatory picks, including another third rounder for losing Milton Williams to the New England Patriots. So, and they're making a run. And another little fun fact, the last time the Dolphins traded a veteran to the Eagles, they went to the Super Bowl that year, and that veteran was Jay Ajayi in 2017. So we're taping this. It's about 5 p.m. on Monday afternoon. Again, as I mentioned, the deadline is at 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. As it stands right now, as we're talking, Jaylen Phillips is the only player who has been traded before 4 p.m. on Tuesday. I wouldn't be surprised to see Bradley Chubb join the club. Maybe Minkah Fitzpatrick. Could be, it wouldn't floor me necessarily for Rasul Douglas. Wound up Matthew Judon if you can get something for him. I still hear people asking me about Jalen Wright. I do not get the idea of trading Jalen Wright, considering the draft capital you gave him. He's in his 2nd year. It started with an injury. You still don't know what he is at running back. So why? And folks, please spare me the Jalen Waddle talk unless you're getting a first-round pick plus, which I don't think you're getting.
I agree with all that. Jalen Waddle, the interesting thing here is, I mean, you had to make a decision on Jalen Phillips because his contract's ending. Jalen Waddle, $11 million next year. That's very comfortable contract for his talent. And the larger point is, okay, since he's under contract for next year, if you want to trade, if your plan becomes to trade him, you have the offseason to do so, when there will be many more teams that might be wanting to get into the fight for him. So unless, like you said, you're blown away by a deal, I don't see that happening. Minka, I think, would. I mean, if they could make it work, did he turn 30? I think he's turned 30. And he's 15 million about. And I got to admit, I can't tell on that a lot of guys on that defense who's playing well, who's not playing well, because there's just
a lot more not than are playing.
Yeah,
well.
Is the guy. So is making not making impactful plays because there's so little impactful plays around him? Is it because he's just not an impactful player? I don't know. I was looking at the Dolphins have 1 interception this year. It's a staggering number. And it's Minka's, and it's a staggering.
That's not great. Rasul Douglas to me is actually.
Yes, I agree. Yes, he'd be I mean, you're not going to get a lot for him. Let's. What are you going to? 7th round pick, 6th round, maybe. But the point is, if somebody's looking for a decent, a stable NFL cornerback that somebody needs that for the playoffs, then absolutely he would be there. And
one team that is looking for cornerbacks is the Green Bay Packers, where Douglas once played. And I'm looking at Minka also. I remember him at training camp. First of all, if you recall, it took several days for him to speak to the media. And then when he spoke to the media, he said all the right things. I mean, made it a point to say how happy he was to be coming back to South Florida. Didn't want to say anything about the Steelers. But, I mean, the impression he gave was like not happy to be in South Florida. And if you go back to the last time he was in South Florida, it was at the start of the 2019 season when the Dolphins, in the 2 games he played for Miami that year, they got beat 59-10 and 43-0. Now he comes back to Miami, and then it's another situation where things have gone off the rails. And Minka's got to be thinking to himself, oh, man, here we go again. Get me the hell out of here. It's going to be easy to tie again, 5 p.m. while we're talking. Only 1 trade made, but the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones apparently has said that the Cowboys have consummated a trade. And for some out there suggesting that it was for Minka. And that's too big a jump. Too big a jump to cross right now, but something to keep an eye on. And going back to Rasul Douglas, Mike McDaniel said on Monday that he would not rule him out for the game against the Buffalo Bills on Sunday because of the toe injury he sustained against Baltimore last Thursday night. Who's untouchable for you before I let you go? Is there anybody where
Patrick Paul?
Okay.
Be
the consensus.
The question become Devon Achane. Okay, where is he at? Because he's your best offensive player. You're going to have to pay him.
Yep.
And this gets into the plan, the big picture plan of the Dolphins. What are they thinking? Are they thinking we're 3 years away? Where you need somebody to assemble that big picture, because if it's 3 years, which nobody looks 3 years, shouldn't anyways. You can turn it around quicker if you have smart people, but that becomes a question because you could, he's an impactful player and teams would want him. So I'm not saying trade him. I'm just saying there has to be some type of a mindset. What are we doing here? What are we doing? And what are we trying to do now? What are we trying to do in the off season? Are we back to collecting just draft picks for anybody? But, I think, is Patrick Paul the only untouchable? I'm trying to think who else, what do we think of Jordan Brooks? I mean, he's a great, very good, but for the right price, you would move on from him.
Correct, because he's not cheap. And the one of the beauties of Patrick Paul is he's playing very well. He looks like he's got a great future, and he's on a rookie contract.
He's in his second year. And those are the type of players when you're rebuilding. Yep. And what other players like that did Chris Grier leave the Dolphins?
Like even Chop is like on his rookie contract, but Chop has not been particularly impressive so far this season. So I don't know. Oh, fun times ahead for the Miami Dolphins. That's going to wrap it up He is Dave Hyde. Check out his fine work at the South Florida Sun Sentinel, sunsentinel.com. As always, please like, subscribe, comment, share, pass the word, all that good stuff. Check out the written content at MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com. We will be back here on Tuesday, maybe with a behind enemy lines discussion, talking about the Buffalo Bills. I want to get the viewpoint of the Dolphins from an opponent's side. So that could be very interesting. I hope whoever my guest is, takes it easy on the Dolphins and doesn't take too many shots. But we shall see. It's fair game right now because the Dolphins, again, not going particularly well. Dave, thank you as always, my friend.
Good seeing you, Alan.
Everyone enjoy the rest of your Monday.